Imagine a prison where guards barely dare to go inside, where prisoners walk around carrying guns and knives, where gangs control entire sections, and where thousands of people are locked up while the prison was only designed to hold a fraction of them. This was La Sabaneta, a prison in Maracaibo, Venezuela. And on January 3, 1994, this place turned into a nightmare. A conflict between prisoners spiraled completely out of control. A fire broke out. People tried to escape. But according to witnesses, some prisoners attempting to flee were attacked, shot, and stabbed. When the smoke finally cleared, at least 108 prisoners were dead. But perhaps the most disturbing part of this story isn't what the prisoners did. It's what witnesses said happened while the authorities watched. La Sabaneta, officially known as the Maracaibo National Prison, opened in 1958. On paper, it was a prison, but in reality, control was gradually slipping away from the authorities. The prison was severely overcrowded. In 2013, for example, the facility was reportedly designed to hold around 700 prisoners, while nearly 3,700 people were being held there. But this situation didn't happen overnight. For years before the infamous massacre, violence had already become a daily reality. According to a U.S. State Department report, at least 71 prisoners were killed inside Sabaneta in 1993 alone, while around 100 others were injured. The prison eventually earned a terrifying reputation: the prison of death. Inside La Sabaneta, there weren't just prisoners. There were gangs, and these groups fought for power, territory, and control. Weapons and drugs could make their way inside the prison. And in parts of the facility, prisoners had effectively created their own rules. That meant a dispute between two groups wasn't simply an argument. It could turn into a war. And that's exactly what happened on January 3, 1994. That morning, a conflict broke out between rival groups. Exactly what happened and how the violence began has never been completely established. But one thing is certain: it spiraled completely out of control. One group of prisoners attacked another section. A fire was started. The flames spread through part of the prison. Panic broke out inside. Smoke filled the corridors. Prisoners desperately tried to escape, but according to Human Rights Watch, some of those attempting to flee the fire were shot or stabbed. There were even reports of beheadings. And while all of this was happening, guards and members of the National Guard were present. According to witnesses who later spoke to Human Rights Watch, it took approximately 2 hours before serious intervention took place. 2 hours, while part of the prison was on fire. 2 hours in which prisoners were fighting to survive. 2 hours in which people were trapped between flames, smoke, and armed inmates. Human Rights Watch described evidence suggesting that the failure to intervene may have been deliberate. Other reports suggested that the authorities were simply unable or unwilling to bring the situation under control quickly. Whatever the exact reason, the result was devastating. When the chaos was finally over, authorities began counting the dead. The official death toll eventually reached 108 prisoners. But even that number remained uncertain. Human Rights Watch reported that some bodies had been burned so badly that they may never have been fully recovered. Of the bodies that were recovered, only 47 could initially be positively identified. For families outside the prison, this meant something horrifying. They didn't know whether their loved one was dead. They didn't know whether he was still alive. and they weren't given immediate answers. For days, families waited for information. The Sabaneta massacre wasn't an isolated incident. It was the result of years of problems: extreme overcrowding, poor conditions, corruption, a lack of staff, weapons inside the prison walls, and a system in which prisoners had gained more and more power. Human Rights Watch described Venezuelan prisons during that period as severely overcrowded, understaffed, and filled with weapons, drugs, and gangs. Sabaneta wasn't simply a prison where something terrible happened one day. It was a prison where control had been disappearing for years. For more true crime stories, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Crime Static. Because behind every crime, there's a story.